Hello and welcome once again to Crazy Comics and Stories. It's me, your charming and delightful Uncle Rat Bastard, but I need to put a new word in front of that because I got my COVID-19 check and I said that I would buy myself one crazy stupid thing. That same day, I got a Groupon that for $11 I could buy a square inch of land in Scotland, and it would be used for restoration of a castle, and get a title. So I am now Lord Uncle Rat Bastard. And at the other end of the series of tubes and wires that we call the internets is Joe, Crazy Writer. How you doing today, Joe?
You know, according to Rule 34, you and I are sleeping together. Somewhere, we're making sweet, sweet love to each other. I'm stroking your back, you're putting your hand on my thigh, and now I can look at you and say, my lord.
I would rather if people looked at me and went, good lord!
You know, and that's the sad thing. For those of you who have no idea what the fuck Rule 34 is, if it exists, there is a porn of it. If there isn't, there will be. So according to Rule 34, there is a porn of Crazy Comics and Stories.
I don't want to know about it. The only
and you're just
the only one that I want to know about is the Flintstones one. Wait a minute. What?
Thank you for calling in. Cory'd be talking now, but his mouth is full. Folks, we don't even have a Wikipedia page. Why the hell are you making porn of this podcast? What's wrong with you?
No,
that's not right.
Bitches.
I know.
Well, this...
Other than that, I'm doing okay.
This is a fill-in episode, by the way.
It is?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
That means we have been hit by the dreaded deadline doom. And because I worry about such things, because I worry about everything, we have fill-in episodes in case Joe takes off to the hinterlands or I get hit by a banana truck.
Or somebody who's hunting lords finds you easy prey.
Oh. But
besides, if you are, I've got a key for you. Don't worry. I got like 1,000 keys I don't know what to do with, but that's a different subject.
We are running about an hour late.
We are. It's my fault.
Why are we late? Why?
Well, I gotta tell you, I was giving Cory grief before we start, and I don't know if it's on tape or not, because one of these days, Cory, I hope you make you can make a fill-in podcast of all the off commentary stuff. Just the stuff we talk about. But yeah, right. As I swear, I was texting Cory, just ideas for the show, trying to get ahead of time. And I got nothing back. Now, the only reason I worry about it is, and I'm sure Cory will talk about this when we get to freaking, is if there's a candle, there's burning on both ends. Cory's figured out how to burn 3 ends at once. Your job's stressful. You're going to the group home. I've been reaching out to people I haven't heard from in ages, and when they're not jumping down my throat back at me, it's actually quite pleasant. So I was a little worried, making sure you're okay. And I saw you on the Facebooks. I sent another email, whatever. It's water under the bridge. So we had to postpone our normal podcast time, and the episodes we had planned kind of got pushed back. And then we were all ready to go, and all of a sudden, I get a phone call from someone I haven't talked to in a while, my old partner, Pat. And right on cue, Cory calls. The good old Skype. So I had to just hang up and say, I'll get back to you. And then after I finished talking with Pat, and then I get a couple emails from people that I reached out to. And now it's like, what is it? It's on Friday at 1 o'clock. Everybody wants to get a hold of poor Joe. I got a podcast to do. We're in the deadline here. Cory's got to jump back into the job trade. He's single-handedly holding the economy up. So, anyways, I was just talking with Pat for a bit, just catching up, see what he was up to.
Well, what did you two talk about?
Just kind of catching up. I mean, he was getting things onto the eBays. Same thing I'll probably do after we're done. I was telling him, the JLA Avengers trade paperback that I had sold mine copy a while back. Somebody just posted one for $200, and he said, well, I got one. I get rid of it. he actually owns a page of that. I mean, so he, yeah, Pat, for him, when he eBays, he doesn't deal with $100 trifles. He's dealing with original art in the thousands. So I was telling him, well, you can go and they have a little button up near the search that says advance. And when you hit advance, comes up, hit the sold button, redo your search, and it'll show you what everything's sold for. He'd never done that before because the stuff he sells, you never get. He sells a rare one-of-a-kind original art page. You can't use that function if not up in the $5,000-$6,000 range.
Thousands and thousands of dollars.
Lots of money. So, and I taught him something new. And when you search for something, over on the far right is a little advanced button, and you press it, and you can search sold listings. You just go down, click the box that says sold, research, and then it comes up and tells you what things have sold for. Obviously, for Pat, it didn't matter because when you're dealing with one-of-a-kind original art, nobody's going to have a pre-sold one. But in a case of something like the JLA Avengers trade paperback, it said they are selling anywhere from $75 to upwards of $105. He's like, why is that? And I said, well, anytime you get two publishers involved, it's out of print. The price goes crazy. And unless they reprint it sometime soon, hear that, Marvel DC? You're looking how to make money. We're fucking giving you all this information. Anyway, so he's probably off to eBay to sell his. So if you're interested, go look. It'll probably be there. I don't know if he's going to auction it or just even auctions are going like $75. So mine's long gone. I decided to keep with the Absolute. But I was also telling Pat.
Now, here's a question. How much
Sure.
is the Absolute going for?
I didn't even look up. Excuse me while I whip this out.
Woo!
Hey now. Let's see. As I fire up the old Kray 4000, I'm on eBay's. Go Absolute JLA Avengers. Hit the old enter button. In this case, I'm doing all category. Double check to make sure I spelt it right. There are none on the eBays right now. So in this case, I'll go over to what I said before, the fancy advance button. Hit sold listings, search, research. Oh, sweet bejesus. 7 sold. Anywhere from 3, one's at an auction for 2. One sold for 50. Most recently are upwards of the $300-$400 range.
Okay, because the one that sold for 50 is like, well, it cost $100. So
yeah, you got
lost money.
That was. You got a deal on that one. That's why I'm not always convinced with auctions because it's always a hit or miss. Whereas if you put it, and you can do this even if you don't have an eBay store, you just put it on eBay as a buy it now and put make an offer on it and see if anybody will make an offer. But now you know an idea. If I were to sell mine, and don't ask because I'm not, I would probably start mine at 300 and go for. Actually, let me qualify. The ones that are going higher are the ones that Perez signed, or that a lot of people have signed. I had one of those too once upon a time. So the non-signed ones are hovering around 200. So signed 400, unsigned 200. And that's the scoop. I also told Pat I had an artifact because as we were cleaning the garage last weekend, I ran across another pile of papers from my shop, and I have here a note from Pat. I said, "You probably want this back." It says, we owe Hot Comics West $92 for Shadowhawk. Make comics. I give back to Brian $493. Oh, and bring Nick's Glow in the Dark Max. Max. So that tells you when this was actually kind of what we traded between the shops. We just wrote down things. But I mean, look at these numbers. 50 Supreme, 100 Wildcats, 40 Wildcats, 50 Wildcats, 30 more Supreme, and 45 Split Image. That's where the $493 come from. And then you add on $92 for Shadowhawk. This had to have been back in the heyday when Image was going crazy. because we were not only buying things from Cap, we were buying them from Diamond Comics as well. Back when Image was hot, 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 hot. But I got this handwritten note for Pat. Maybe in the next couple of weeks I'll dig through that, see if I can find any more fun things. Back in the days when things were hot. 93, 94. Good time to own a comic shop.
What about 1989?
89?
Yeah.
Isn't that where we left off on my my fabulous sketchbook?
Why, yes, it is, Pepper Boy.
All right. For those of you playing along, this is part 2 of my sketchbook. Part 1 was, I guess, last week, by the way the fill-ins fall. What you do is this is actual interactive.
We recorded it last week. When will this drop?
Who knows? I don't know. Whatever. But what you do is you go to Facebook and find my lovable page, which my personal page is Crazy Joe Rider, and it's everything on the page is public, so you should be able to hit photos, go into albums, and then look as you go down. You'll see one that says My Sketchbook, where I've got all my stuff, all my sketches up. And in this case, scroll your way down until you find a Plastic Man, which is about the 25th page, or I should say the 25th photo. The previous 25 were in the last one. This one is taking place in 1989 at an MCBA show. And what happens is when you hear the magic, and you know why that sounds so cool?
That one sounds much nicer than last time.
You know why? Because Chris is actually at work, so I can use her fine china.
Ooh.
So anytime you hear, just like those old film strips, for those of you who grew up in the 70s, when you hear this, I can do better. There we go. Move on to the next page. This one, number 25, is Gordon Purcell, who I don't know what he's doing now. He's doing sketches, so if you track him down on Facebook, he'll probably do commissions for you. A lot of artists are. This was back in '89, and I asked him who was his favorite character. Gordon at the time, I believe, was doing a lot of Star Trek, and he was always drawn in to do Star Trek because he did fabulous characters. You recognize Picard, you recognize Troy, you recognize O'Brien. He wanted to do superheroes though, so I asked him, "Who's your favorite superhero?" And he drew Plastic Man. And I don't believe there was a Plastic Man book being done in '89, so that was kind of fun.
Well, I was going to talk a little more about Gordon.
I don't have a backwards bell, so if you go forward, just wait and let's tell us more about Gordon.
Gordon, he did one superhero book. Joe, do you know what it was?
I do not.
It was at Marvel.
Really?
It was a team book. He did the Silver Sable series. He worked on the Silver Sable series after the original artist left.
Cool.
So you could go dig those up. But he recently did a Star Trek book, and he is the best Star Trek artist, in my opinion. Not because he's my friend, not because I know him, but because he doesn't just use photo reference. He's actually able to draw characters doing things and looking like they're in motion, where when a lot of people use photo reference, it looks very stiff and very posed. His stuff looks very natural, and he's so good at the likenesses. I actually have, when I did my original art purge, I kept his page because I have right here in my hands Gordon Purcell doing a page from the immortal classic Snakes on a Plane.
Oh, absolutely.
And the cool thing about it is it was digitally inked, so it's just the pencils.
And you could draw in your own MF comment.
So, no, there's no Samuel L. Jackson on the page, but it is a good action sequence from the beginning of the lead character. Basically, this is page 1, and it's the lead character riding his motorcycle to where he actually sees the crime take place. And then I also have page 2. No, wait, this is page 6, which does have Samuel L. Jackson shooting somebody.
Yep.
So I do have 2 pages. I thought I only had 1, but I guess I have 2.
Woohoo!
So there is that. And I remember when I saw that he had done the adaptation for Snakes on a Plane, I said, I want pages from that. I want pages from that. He did not work on the issue that had the famous, I want these MF and snakes. Well, we can swear. I want these motherfucking snakes off this motherfucking plane.
Yeah.
Which is how I end every Friday at my job.
And everybody in the theater, when we went to see it, cheered.
And here's the other thing. Not only do I use that phrase at work, I use the TV version. Joe, have you ever watched Snakes on a Plane when it's on like FX or something?
No.
Samuel L. Jackson redubbed the swearing himself. That's it. I've had it with these monkey fighting snakes on this Monday to Friday plane.
And I hate Monday to Friday planes. I'm telling you. Give me a Saturday, Sunday plane any day.
And
all right.
Moving on.
For those of you sitting on the next page, I believe this is Gary Hartle. Gary Hartle is currently an American producer, directing and doing storyboard artist for things. Well, he had been working on Animaniacs, Tasmania, and Wabbit, a Looney Tunes production, and where he was producer. And this was back when he was hanging around at our con. I do remember because when I showed this to Brian Wilson, one of the how would you say not necessarily Lord, but one of the co-founders or original guys at the MCBA, he always says, because shortly after this particular con, Gary went out to Hollywood, as a lot of the artists did.
Through the friend of mine that went around scooping up artists at the convention.
I think
work on Animaniacs.
From the last one was the one who went. So, and again, same thing. I asked him, "Who's your favorite character?" And this is who he drew.
Joe, there are 2 Gary Hartle stories. First off, what character was he drawing when this convention started?
I was trying to find it, and I could not find it.
Conan the Barbarian.
Conan.
Story number 2. This was when I was 89. I wasn't running things, but people thought I was running things because I was well dressed. And Dan Jurgens came up to me and said that we needed to speak with Gary Hartle because he is giving away sketches for free, making it so everybody at the convention thought that sketches were free.
Stop.
And this is like the second year of the convention. I don't feel like I know any of these people yet. I sit down with Gary and start up a conversation. I let him know. And he goes, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just so excited to draw comics that I wanted to give, he was just so happy to draw comics. Anybody who knew who he was, he just wanted to give him a sketch. And now he's in animation, so I think Conan's the only comic he ever drew.
I'd be like the way the boys handled Pat and I way back at the original con we went to. When we were giving away selling comics for 20% off. I said, let them. If you look at the sketch, this is the type of sketch he was doing. I like it, but when you compare it to some of the guys who are comic professionals, you do what you can. And again, in storyboarding, you just need to have the action portrayed on the board so you see what's going on. Our old friend Dan Wiesenmeyer, that's how he got so much work in storyboarding, because he drew a very clean-cut comic strip, which amazed everybody. And the fact that he was fast. He could bang out things. I remember him doing overnighters at the old shop before Pat and I took over. And, of course, then he moved his studio into his home. So, anyways, you said you had another story.
Those were the two stories. First, that he got snatched up for Conan, and second, that he was giving away sketches and made Dan Jurgens angry.
Yes. All right, let's see if Cory recognizes this next guy.
Fabian Nieceza drawing Speedball.
Very good. And they were doing New Warriors at the time. If I recall, Fabian was writing it, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
Joe, what else did Fabian do at our convention?
I know he did a panel, but I don't know what, I didn't get a chance to hang at the panel long because, Pat and I were dealing comics. We were dealers. We had businessman. Always make money. Businessman, gotta do it. But what else did he do?
Do you remember Spider-Man at our convention?
Vaguely.
He was Spider-Man.
Oh, was he?
Yes.
I do remember that because, not because of that, but I know Marvel had a program where you could have somebody come and be Spider-Man. Either they would send a actor to do it, or they would, if you had someone who could fit the body type, obviously, Pat couldn't fit in there. I probably couldn't have. They would send you the costume. And as the years went on, the price got more and more ridiculous. So eventually we stopped it. But did the con pay for this, or was this just a bonus Fabian brought?
He brought it along. And one of the other people at the convention, somebody he knew whose name is lost to history, just started teasing him about it. Until eventually he put on the costume and walked around the convention.
That's great. Now, you can kind of tell, here's one of the problems I had with the convention book, because you can kind of see the next sketch coming up, although it doesn't really bleed into each other. So without any ado, here's the next one.
Second sketch by Chaz Trog.
No, this is the third, because remember the last one he did was just two. That. Yeah, that he actually did three. He's the only guy who's done three in my book, because the first one he did was Coyote, and then he did that weird symbol thing because that was in between comics. And this time I just asked, would you do me an Animal Man? He just did a quick Animal Man sketch, which was cool because at the time he was doing Animal Man, the one written by Grant Morrison. So this was a lot to do. And if you kind of look down in the corner, you can kind of see a little where Fabian drew kind of hard, and his impression went onto the sketchbook. One thing I never did, and I probably should have, brought along a cardboard piece, like just a little piece of comic book backing, and put it in between. So when you get guys who do full inks, it doesn't bleed, or guys who press really hard. Because Fabian in the last one did a pencil sketch and then drew his name in, which was kind of cool. And again, this was a really nice one by Chaz. I think at this time, though, I had decided, you know what, if I get a sketch from one person, I'm not going to get another one. Just goofy rules I came up with as I went along. Now, this is another one where it comes down where I probably should have asked this particular artist for something specific. I believe this is Andrew Cummings, because at the time he was doing Aliens. And so if you walked up to Andrew, and I thought at first it was John Cummings, but I don't think that's John's name. Everybody expected Aliens. And unless you asked for an Aliens, and I think he was charging if he did do an Aliens, because face it, that's a lot of work. He just drew this nondescript character, which was kind of cool. And this is also something I should have done, and I did in later ones, where if you can't quite make out who wrote it, you should probably just put in pencil on the back who it is. Because again, I know it's Cummings is the name, and there were two when I was looking up artists and Aliens. And again, this is the first series way back in '89. I believe it's Andrew. And if I'm wrong, just send me an email. I've been wrong before. I'll be wrong again. Now we have one of the guys I actually became friends with at the con, Paul Fricke, doing, I believe it's Death out of the Troll Lords series that he did with Scott Beaderstat, and wasn't there a third person on there?
Len
Strzeski, right. Because we had later on, we had a reunion of these guys at an MCBA con. Back then.
With the editor.
No, what had happened is I asked Paul to do a sketch.
Brian Augustine.
And back then, this was still '89 when Troll Lords was. I don't know if it might have been flying off the black and white boom, and the bust was coming on. But because they were local guys, people were very excited. And he sat and he did this sketch and took him about 5-10 minutes, and it was really, really, I mean, amazed everybody. Even to the point that the next guy, when I asked him to do it, and this is Sean was kind of like, that's a lot. A sketch, you should really charge for that. And Paul's like, nah, I'm just doing this. I'll just loosen up. It's kind of a strange thing to ask somebody to, say, hey, this sketch that you're doing for free, why don't you charge this guy now? It's one thing if you ask to do it. And in this case, Sean did a really cool one of the Troll Lords, which was amazing in and of itself. So, and that was it for '89 for me doing sketches at the con. I have no idea who else had been to the con, but I'm sure if we ever got Brian or somebody, they could probably give us a play-by-play of each convention. But now the next one is one that I am thrilled to my belly button to have. Cory, who do you think that is? Actually, Cory was there.
That's a scribble.
Yeah.
I don't know, some hack.
Yeah, he'll never
no good hack.
Let me see if I got his name. Niall Gaiman. Niall Gaiman. Doing, I believe,
no, it's Neil Gaiman, ladies and gentlemen.
Neil Gaiman can draw. This was when he was doing an appearance at Dreamhaven Books. Now, this had to have been around issue...
This was when the first trade paperbacks came out.
Or was it the hardcover?
It might have been the hardcover.
Because the first thing that came out was the Seasons of the Mist hardcover, which was absolutely beautiful. And then they started doing trades. And then they did the hardcovers, which I have in my collection because, I reread this whole thing every so often. And so everybody would come up and they would have Neil sign things. And I have handed Neil my sketchbook. And to everybody's utter amazement, he drew Morpheus. And everybody was gobsmacked. And people are like, oh my God, this is amazing. He goes, yeah, I like to just break out and draw. Why don't you draw your own issue? He says, no, I'm not a drawer. I'm a writer. I may draw things for the artist to give an idea where I want the action to go. But no, this is just for fun. And again, this was Neil Gaiman back before he was Neil Gaiman, and you could bring in like 20 issues of the comic and he would sign each and every one, which he did. I still have some because he asked if he wanted them personalized, and a few of them he did, and a few of them he just wrote. And then there were some, like he did the one issue of Hellblazer where he would draw a ghost on the cover. And there were some where he would add little things. So obviously he'd been doing this for some time. I still have quite a few of the ones that he personalized. The other ones I've since sold because as I purge things, I'm kind of like, why would I do this? But this sketch is probably one of the coolest ones next to Art Spiegelman from the previous one. Cory, you were there. I think you were there with me. Weren't you at this signing?
Yes.
What
I
did
think that
you
was
have?
one of our first things we ever did together.
Yeah.
That and the Cerebus signing.
Yep. Did you have anything signed at this one? Well, you must have.
Yes, I got stuff. I got issue 8 of Sandman signed.
Yep.
Which was the first appearance of Death, and also because I had the retailer copy. Now, Joe, I don't know if you had a retailer copy or not.
No, this is before I had the
retailer yet.
I found one eventually, either off eBay or from another retailer, but it wasn't anything. I didn't have it at the time.
In the issue was basically a letter from Karen Berger saying, this book is not selling well enough to continue, but we think it's fantastic. We're going to ship you extra copies. Please, please, please push this book.
And by the time issue 20 came around in Seasons of the Mist, it was hot because I went back.
No.
Yeah.
It never sold that great. Even during the huge boom.
Maybe so. but back issues were going nuts.
Right.
Because I was able to get a run, and to my delight, I found out I had an issue 1 because I must have picked it up thinking, oh, Kirby Sandman. And I looked at it and, oh, the part in my hair couldn't go fast enough. It totally was over my head. But I was able to piece together everything as the prices were exploding.
Yes, prices exploded as a back issue, but the book never sold that well. I think issue 50, which had a gold cover, gold,
very gold.
I think it only sold 75,000 copies.
That could
And
be.
that was the peak, and this was when Spider-Man was selling 750,000 copies.
This might have been the start of the phenomena too, where people would wait for the trade.
Comic shops, for years, comic shops didn't do well with the trades. It was when the trades got into bookstores. This was the first real big crossover series, because you had Watchmen, which crossed over, and if you notice, if you look in your Overstreet, when you look up the trade paperbacks, and I don't know if they have it anymore, but it used to be the DC version of the trade paperback and the Warner Books version.
Yeah.
And that was a big deal at the time. And then there for Watchmen, a DC version and a Warner Books version. Warner Books put out Sandman, and it exploded.
Well, they did the same thing with Dark Knight. They were like multiple editions, and people were going, let's see, Watchmen, hardcover, collection, slipcase, hardcover from 2008, trade paperbacks, 98. Yeah, no, there's no, I know first edition trades will go higher just because of that, but yeah, and again, this is the guide. Check your Amazon and eBay to see what they go for. So,
but I always point out to people that, these Vertigo books don't sell well. Vertigo books never sold well in comic shops. It was the trades that sold well outside of comic shops.
Unless you think they're not selling well. I do believe they've started another hardcover edition of Sandman, which I was tempted to go because for some reason my first volume has disappeared. I know either my daughters have it, they just haven't found it. And I'm like, girls, don't lose it. Daddy doesn't want to buy a whole new run. All right, now we're to 1990. Why? Because Jeff Butler, who does Kato of the Green Hornet, who was doing Green Hornet at the time, was kind enough to actually put a date on his sketch. He has a very clean signature, and this is a phenomenal sketch of Kato. And Green Hornet at the time was being done by Now, which is no longer in business, but they did books like Green Hornet, they did Mr. T and the T-Force, and I think Fright Night, the cult classic film, which went on for some issues. So,
and did you mention Married with Children?
Oh, I forgot about that. One of the
Married
first,
with Children was their most successful book, but it's not the one that's near and dear to our hearts. Joe,
No.
What Now book is near and dear to our hearts?
Ralph Snart.
Yes. And there are still Ralph Snart books being made.
I know. Isn't it great? And I remember the last time we were at Dreamhaven Books, Butch was so happy to find him in the 10 cent or 20 for a buck thing.
Well, one other thing I want to say about Jeffrey Butler, I knew him from his very long run on Badger.
Badger. Not that one. This is Gary Dooley, and the comics he did were C Comics, an independent one, and this is his favorite character. So I believe Gary was another guy who went out to, he might have gone out to Hollywood to find his fame. I don't know. I looked, I couldn't find anything on it, but C Comics was a smaller comic company that he did. And you can see the little bit of ink splatter that Jeff did such a great job on his sketch that it kind of bled through. But Joe hadn't quite figured out yet to put a little piece of protective paper down. I don't even know if people do sketchbooks like this anymore. So go figure. And now, the man, the myth, the minimalist, but still a very powerful sketch, Dan Jurgens. This is the first time I think I actually approached him for a sketch, and I was always kind of wary of talking to him because he was, was he one of the original guys in the MCBA?
Yes, he used to show up for the meetings organizing it.
Oh yeah, and he was very. I'm trying to say that how I want to say forceful, opinionated, but I don't want to be negative about it because he was often right. You know.
Yeah.
I do remember. I think the one time that I might have gotten on his radar where he realized I just wasn't another rube was at one of the meetings where Pat and I showed up because we said, hey, we'll show up as retailers, and we're talking con business. And Pat and I were like, you've got to bring in some name guests. And this was kind of how did it work with Jesus Christ? He was honored everywhere but in his hometown.
Yes.
Did they drive him out of Nazareth? And Dan was kind of the same way. He international acclaim from Death of Superman. A fantastic guy.
If you take a look at the date.
This is before.
This is 2 years before. Up until Death of Superman, Dan was kind of...
you're just Dan.
Yeah.
He's just another one of the local guys like Gordon and Pete Krause that just show up and never do anything. And it was crazy because anywhere else, Dan Jurgens was a major name, except at MCBA cons. He was just...
Except after Death of Superman.
Oh, after Death of Superman.
Oh, my God.
We were still at the Thunderbird.
Yeah.
His line went out the door and down the hall.
And out of the building.
I remember that because at the time...
Out the door, down the stairs, through the lobby. We thought, it'll go, back the back hallway, and, that'll be more than enough. No, it actually went outside because I had to go out there and basically was... Okay, are you here to come in or are you here for Dan Jurgens? Are you here to come in or are you here for Dan Jurgens?
Now, was he outside the room or was he, if I recall, was he just right inside the door? Or did
right
he
inside the door.
Yeah, because I remember...
Now I think it was a dumb fucking idea.
Well, Pat and I were outside. We were off to the left. And I do remember it was one of those weird cons because Dan and Brian, all they brought was... the Phoenix figure from Toy Biz. And they sold out within half a day. Dealers were going crazy. Fans were going crazy. That's all they brought. And they bought, I forget what they brought, like 500 of these things. And they were done with half the con. They said, we made our money. They went home. So Pat and I took over half the table. But halfway through the con, they asked me, because I was a volunteer at the time, if I would just sit with Dan, and just make sure. And I started to feel a little sorry for Dan because he's now at the belly button stage of the con where all he's seeing is people's belly button. I'm like, all he's doing is signing. And I'm like, I got to get something going. So I went back and I looked at the Wizard, which we were using as one of the 3 price guides at the time. The other 2 being Overstreet and Comic Values Monthly. And I looked at an article and then I came back and I started asking Dan questions from the article. And I think that was kind of a relief to Dan because he actually was like, oh, finally somebody's asking questions. People aren't just standing in front of him getting an autograph and not saying anything or even saying, people weren't even saying like, oh man, this is so cool. I loved it. So I think in a way Dan got what he wished for and then maybe, and he could say yes or no. Maybe he didn't want it once he got it, But at this point,
it certainly has helped him make a very good career. And I'll say this, Dan Jurgens has been in comics since the early 80s. And he's one of the few people who worked in comics back then who is still actively working in comics now.
It should tell you something about his talent field.
And also about his professionalism. One of the things that Dan said early on is basically he connects with editors and he never misses a deadline.
which
So
is
when
a big one.
you had all the hot artists, they've come and gone because they couldn't hit a deadline. They didn't get along with people. They threw temper tantrums. There were times Dan didn't like editorial stuff, but it's, nope, I'll just keep doing it. He had a short run at Marvel. And the reason, well, short, he did that like 80 issue run of Thor. But he went over to Marvel because he wanted to work on Spider-Man. But he came over during the Clone Saga. And he was told it's going to be, it's going to revert to Peter Parker, really soon. But the sales people kept telling him to stretch it out, stretch it out, stretch it out, stretch it out. And after, they even started a new book for him, if I remember right. But after a few issues, it's like, this isn't Peter Parker. I don't want to do this. And he asked to be, he basically put in a pitch and got on Thor. But that's the only time I could think of where I heard about Dan going to editorial and going, yeah, I don't like this. I don't want to do it.
What was his first work?
Warlord. Because he met Mike Grell at Twin City Comics. Is that correct?
No, it was St. Paul Comic.
Oh, St. Paul
Twin City Comics was Greg Ketter's shop, which closed down. But yeah, John always told the story of he had a picture of Dan standing there in front of Grell waiting for a sketch. And I was there too because I got a really beautiful pencil sketch of the Warlord looking kind of off to the side, just a head sketch. The sketch, since when I was purging my art, I sold it to Pat Gruber. Pat did offer it to me again before he sold it as right of first refusal. And it was the first piece of original art I ever bought. But it wasn't anything other than nostalgia I wanted. I took a picture of it. So somewhere I've got a picture of it. But yeah, I don't, it's not something I saved. I do remember Mike Grell saying, okay, now get home, put some hairspray on it to keep the pencils from smearing. Didn't make it home. I smeared a little bit, but my grandma gave me some hairspray, and I remember out in the yard doing a little bit of spray, not too much because you don't want to saturate it. This was the type of hairspray that was like carcinogenic and blow up in your face, and you could like spray it.
Baby,
Aquanet. So, and they're saying Warlord 63 was 82, so my guess would be seeing Mike Grell had to have predated the con because that was before I was doing sketchbooks. Otherwise, I probably would have taken the sketchbook down. So the first con John did was probably 85, 84. So, but yeah, he always, and the reason why John always brought it up, because when Jurgens did his, talking about meeting Mike Grell, he always attributed it to a different shop. I don't know if it was Comic City or Comic College. And John's like, I got a picture, I getting your picture from, Mike Grell in my shop. And he showed it to me. It was the, Dan, little fan Dan sitting in front of the Mike Grell getting the Warlord pictures. So very cool. So for those of you who dig up Warlord 63 at the next con, bring it to Dan. He might be impressed. Now, a lot of times at conventions, when it was Pat and I, if there was a guest that was there, anyway, when you look at the picture with Dan, all I got to say is I was so utterly impressed with how minimalistic this was, but damn, that's a powerful picture. That's true. That's a true artist there. Now the next guy, he might have been working on Spider-Man at the time.
Yes, he was.
This is Ron Frenz, who is, I believe, the guest of honor, or if not, But Pat went to get the sketch for me because I watched the table while he went and got the sketch. And I have no idea what Pat got. What Pat get? I draw Spider-Man. I asked him to do the same thing, have him draw his favorite character. He drew me a very cool Spider-Man. And so, that's got to be rougher to do because look, a little bit of shading and look at getting the webs just right and making it look like it's Spider-Man versus just a guy with lines on his face. So,
and this is one where I kind of want to tell a little story about Ron Frenz, Joe.
Story time.
I was not a huge fan of Ron Frenz's art because I felt that he aped too much earlier artists. His Spider-Man was very much drawn like Steve Ditko drew Spider-Man. When he's on a Kirby character, he draws that character very much like the way Jack Kirby draws the character, to the point where you might almost want to say that they're swipes. However, Ron at this convention, we brought him in, and by this point I was the point man, because if you look on the old comm flyers, the hotline is my home phone number, which I still have, by the way. He was so nice to deal with, and so friendly, and so charming, and so accommodating to us, and just wonderful conversations about stuff that didn't have to do with comics, that it's like, okay, I may not be the biggest fan of his art, and I'll say this, when he's not drawing like someone else, I really, really like his stuff. He has a very naturalistic style, very influenced by, I would say, Brune Hogarth, the John Buscema, artists like that. But he was such a nice guy, and so fun to be around, that it's like, okay, I don't care that you ape other artists. I'm going to buy your stuff because I want to support you as a person, because you're just a cool guy. And you will talk to Brian Wilson, not the Beach Boy.
Eventually. Nope. Although when he was at our shop and we would tell the Teenage Fan Club, this is Brian Wilson, I said, is that the Beach Boy? I said, yeah, but don't bring it up. He doesn't want to know it.
He is like that too, except he will say, basically, if he has met you at a convention and likes you, he's going to buy every book you do.
Oh, yeah. A lot of the con guys did that. I did the Bing because at the next one, Cory, you might be able to help me. I think it's Kirk Tabus.
Let me take a look here.
And I believe, another guy who ended up going to Hollywood, if I recall.
I don't know this name. I'm sorry.
And I'll have to ask Brian for sure. Again, ask him who his favorite character was. And from Looney Tunes, this is Buster Bunny. You know, Buster.
He might have been working on Tiny Toons.
It's possible. I wasn't what I know. I was a fan at the time. I thought I remembered this stuff forever. Much like with the next guy. Now we're in the 1991, and this is at the infamous 2-day Greenberg show.
Which I did not go to.
Pat and I went as dealers. Greenberg, what was his first name? He was out of New York, and he was doing almost monthly comic book shows all over the United States. He would come to the Twin Cities. The MCBA would do 2 shows, and they were at the Thunderbird. And then across the street was a Marriott, and they would do a quick con show. And the MCBA constantly tried to get the dealers in town not to support him, but the fact of the matter is, you go to these shows, even though they were monthly, and you'd still make money. I went to every one because I'd come back with $500. And again, this was even before I had this shop, but that's a lot of money. So when
the problem we had with him, he would set up the weekend before.
Yeah. And
basically, he was trying to Vince McManus.
And it never really worked because
once he went away, our numbers went up a lot.
You got to remember when Pat and I got involved with the con, we got involved because we felt the con didn't have a retailer presence. After a couple years working, we came up with the attitude, you know what? Fuck the retailers. Because no matter what happened, they're angry bitterly. And it stayed that way until our good buddy Pat McDonough, who was a big Joe Linsner fan, came in, and when a retailer would complain to him, he would say, okay, I'll write you a check. Here's your check for your table back. The MCBA bent over backwards to get retailers involved. And
oh my God, yes.
And it was the fact of the matter was, I think retailers took advantage of the MCBA. And again, back then, what happened is Greenberg came to town, and he was doing this big, fabulous 2-day show. I believe it was at Minneapolis Convention Center.
Yes.
And you'll see some of the names as we talk about the next, where are we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The next 5 people were at the show, and these were just the names. This wasn't counting secondary people that like were locals that set up. Thing was, not every table was sold out. Money-wise, it was a bad con for Pat and I. I remember some dealers just showing up and leaving piles. They would buy collections from the other dealers just because they wanted to get out of the con, and they would just. I watched one dealer take all of his stuff out and leave a pile of used yellow comic bags around behind. There was hardly any line except for a few people. This first one is Chris Claremont. Obviously not a artist, but this is 1991. He was, X-Men were still flying high. And
this was before he was unceremoniously removed from the book.
Yep. So you could go up, you could get a sketchbook. He did a nice autograph. You get comics. I do remember a long time back when I was a wee lad going to comic shows before I was doing sketches and bigger. I mean, this is like back in hotels like Hotel Curtis, Hotel Leamington, downtown Minneapolis, which was another world to a 12-year-old. I mean, my folks would drop me off and then pick me up by 4. That's where I saw people like C.C. Beck. I remember buying Avengers 11 for a pricely sum of $10, but it had Spider-Man in it. Chris Claremont being there, and just he had that look on his face, and this might be a natural Chris Claremont look. He just didn't want to be there. He barely answered questions. He tolerated. And again, this could just be because he was making money. They were paying to have him there, but he was looking at belly buttons all day. All he could do was autograph comics.
Well, and the other thing was the Greenberg shows were notoriously terribly run.
I would say that from that. Matter of fact, as we get forward, I don't know if we'll get to it. Well, no, we should be able to get to it this round. There's another guy who can attest to that. And Butch saved the day, but that's in the future. We're still at 1991. Again, I met Chris Claremont again. I got him to do an autograph. Pretty cool. Now, the next one is one that I've been, he's been to a lot of our shows. Oops, do it better. There we go. This is Christopher Jones. He's a local guy, but I think he's heading out of town, isn't he?
He has already moved out to L.A. because he got a job in Warner Animation.
Which is fantastic, because Chris was a fabulous guy. Back then, he was just one of the guys who was sitting there, and I went up and I asked him, okay, if you were to do a sketch of a character that, say, somebody came to you and said, well, you'll give me your carte blanche, pick any character you want, you can do a series with them. This is who he chose. And if you don't recognize who that is, you seriously lost your comic cred.
Of course, that's the Daredevil bad guy, the Jester, right?
Close enough. I would have gone with that or the Joker from Batman. But either way, this was a nice pencil sketch. The next one, I've been offered lots of money to rip it out of my sketchbook and sell it. I never have. This is, of course, Joe Linsner. Now, this is before he was Joe Linsner. He was just
and now we are after he is Joe Linsner, because the last convention I was at, his table, there was nobody there.
Oh, he got hit, or the last one he was at when Doug from Arsenic's Lullaby, it was hit or miss. There were times I tried to get by and he was crowded, usually right in the beginning. And then there were times when I'd come up and there was nobody there, and I'd like, Holly, go get your poster signed. But this was back in Cry for Dawn days. Cry for Dawn, of course, was the book he did with Joe Monks, and they were just sitting there, ignored. So I was able to get, what I did is I asked Joe, I said, does Dawn ever speak? And he goes, well, she will if she needs to. And I said, well, how about if we do this? If you would draw Dawn and then have Joe have her say something. So Joe drew Dawn. Oh, beautiful. Again, if I ever get the money to have him do me a Supergirl, for my Supergirl art, again, if you're bored, go to my Facebook page and look under my Supergirl art collection. I got everything posted there. But he wrote that, or he drew that, and then Joe wrote in, you want sex? I can't even read that. Violence, nipple pounding, blood curdling, nerve shattering fear. Hey, strap yourself in and I'll make you cry for Dawn.
And the reason for that was She was just a narrator type character.
Yep. What I should have done is I should have called our old buddy Sabrina and had her say that for us. So it would have been much more interesting than my voice. But yeah, and again, you could go, Joe Linsner pages were 20, 25 bucks a piece. Holy cow, if I was a time traveler, I'd go back and just say, I'll write you a check for the whole lot, you know. Again, just walk up, nobody there. Next guy, same thing. Romita Jr. Romita
I'm still
Jr.
mad at.
Well, I'll tell you about this, and then you tell me why you're mad at him. John just basically autograph, and he just drew me a Daredevil head sketch. I asked him to do who his favorite character was. I've seen this. If I ever get Butch to find his sketchbook, we'll compare the sketches he got, because he got a different sketch. But for me, it was Daredevil. He was doing Daredevil at a time. But Cory, why are you mad at him?
We had him signed to be a guest of honor at our convention that year. He pulled out not a month before, not a week before. After his plane had taken off, he called and said, "I'm not going to be able to make it." And we had dropped a lot of money because it was a plane ticket for him and his spouse and the hotel room, and he had other things that he needed. We had dropped a lot of money on him. And he canceled after the last minute. And I don't think we ever got him to come to the show.
Nope.
Because he said, "I'll be back at it. I'll make it up to you." And he never did.
So, John, if you're out there listening, you can still make it up to the guys because they're still putting on shows. Matter of fact, I talked to the MCBA guys. The next one is FallCon, scheduled for October 10th. So write that down in your calendar. I know the guys are still reeling from having to cancel SpringCon, but FallCon's ready to go. I do know that FallCon will not be 2 days because they cannot get anything but the education building, because usually Half Price does their big thing in the grandstand for 3 days.
Yes, they do.
So plan that. The next one, again, speaking of getting a sketch and not getting a sketch, this is Jim Lee. He was one of the names at the show.
I love the sketch. It's the Wendigo fighting. No, John Byrne did that joke.
Yeah.
Never mind.
No, and now here's the weird thing, because Butch got a sketch from Jim Lee. Basically, people would come up, and of course, they were getting things autographed. And I asked Jim if he'd do a sketch, and he doesn't do a sketch. My theory is that Jim Lee, when he does his art, he wants it to be, he's got a Jim Lee style that he wants. I say this because I had bought a Batman Hush signed, remarked edition for $600 back when I had Crazy Comics. And when I got it, it was resketched by Jim Lee, and I was real excited to see it. But when I got it, it was just kind of a quick line sketch of Batman. None of the cross-hatching or the famous detail that Jim Lee is noted for and has been seen doing. Matter of fact, I think even as we speak, he's still doing sketches to benefit retailers because of the whole shutdown thing going on with Gaiman Comics and stuff. So I don't fault Jim anything for this. He was polite about it. He wasn't rude. However, Butch, who has a tendency to hang around people and get to be friends with them, got a sketch from him, a quick line sketch of Wolverine smoking a cigar. And Butch tells the story that, it was just Jim had to go and do a panel. And he said, "Come here, grab my sketchbook and do this quick thing about 10 seconds," and left. So, again, Jim, if you're out there and you want to make it up for me, don't worry about it. Well, I could use a Supergirl sketch. That would be cool. But what your stuff's going for, to $18,000 to $20,000, you are way beyond my price tag. And so, like I said, I don't fault him because that's just the way it goes. The next guy you probably never heard of.
That is a terrible sketch.
That is a terrible, terrible sketch. Again, this is the same story. And part of it was, you find it hard to believe, but I have trouble introducing myself to people. If you come and say, "This is Joe, writer, blah, blah, blah," no problem. But for me to come up to someone, say like Ron Frenz, and Oh, could you do me a Spider-Man sketch? I don't do it well. And I hide it by the fact that I'm boisterous and I make a lot of jokes. And same thing with Stan Lee. This was years before you and I talked about it, where I say, thank you for everything you've done. Or like our good buddy Adam Vermillion, who's doing his own podcast. What the hell's the name of it?
For the Love of Comics. And
Check
the
it out.
oft-delayed Fantastic Forecast, which may have a new episode if I ever get time to mix it.
And he walked up to Stan Lee and he goes, I've been waiting my whole life to meet you. And he goes, oh, sorry for having you wait, fanboy. And it kills. Now, I have met Stan Lee in different settings before, but at this time he was the other big name at this show. John Romita Jr., Jim Lee, Stan Lee. Well, Pat, I watched the stuff. Pat went. And he not only did he get this signed for me, but he also got my Fantasy Masterpiece #1, where when you open the front cover, it's got Stan without his mustache, and that one he personalized to me. To Joe, one hell of a guy or something, Stanley. And so that's one of those that's a keeper of mine forever. I've bought other Stanley things with his autograph, but these are the two that are personalized. So Excelsior, Stan Lee. So
and that's a good place.
I was going to say that's the last of the Greenberg show, because the next one we're back at the MCBA, and if we're up in an hour, this might be a good place to pause.
Why, yes, it is.
Now, what's interesting is we did 35 sketches. No, how do we do? We did 25 the first show, and this time we got through sketch 45. So we did a little bit more, but we're getting some good stories out of these things. Because like I said, the fun part is Cory was involved with the cons here, so he knows some behind-the-scenes stuff. And like I said, it'll be interesting to see. If you want to go peek ahead, go ahead, peek ahead. But whenever we need a fill-in again, we got the rest of my sketchbook. We're maybe at the halfway point. So,